Welcome to the Life Science Success Podcast. My name is Don, and for those of you who don't know me, I am a consultant in life sciences. I help companies manage complexity and increase performance. Today's podcast is going to be a little bit different. So oftentimes I interview guests, and one of the things that I do in between interviews quite frequently is I actually check out the latest life sciences podcasts that are available out. There are quite a few who, started last year, but since then, excuse me, I'm losing my voice as I talk. So there are quite a few of them that have since stopped, and it's pretty common in the podcast world that, quite a few podcasts stop. But the one thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit today is the top life sciences podcasts that I listen to, my top selections of podcasts. So hopefully this is helpful to those of you who, get a chance to watch or listen to this interview. So without further ado, why don't I go ahead and get started with my first selection here in my first podcast would be actually the DNA Today podcast by Kira Dineen. Kira actually has an interesting format. She does quite a few podcasts that are much more scientific centered than a lot of my podcasts. Typically, my podcast, I focus a lot more on leadership and the leaders in life sciences. And so with that, I just focus a lot more from the leadership side. And so just to kind of cover a little bit about her show. So first of all, Kira's show, the DNA Today podcast is her show summary says that she educates the public on genetic and public health topics through event coverage, news stories, book, movie reviews, interviews. Guests include genetic counselors, researchers, patient advocates, and professors in the field of genetics. And so with the DNA Today podcast, like I said, it's a very scientific sort of podcast. In my view, it's one that folks should definitely check out because it covers just an awful lot in terms of new science that's going on in the life sciences field, and definitely something to check out. Recent episodes that they've had as well have been Nutrigenomics with Yael Joffe, Inherited Retinal Degeneration with Blueprint Genetics, Dr. Miga and Dr. Philippi on the Telomere and Telomere Consortium, Eric Green on the Complete Human Genome Project, and then lastly, the DNA Experiments with Stephanie Ryan. So again, just some really good episodes with regards to I would say the overall NGS market would definitely be impacted by a lot of the things that they talk about, as well as just in general things related to new science that's coming related to the DNA environment. So I'm stumbling a little bit just to be open with you. I've got one screen, so just to kind of paint the picture here for a second, since I don't normally do these where I've got material that I'm presenting. So I've got one screen essentially that I'm presenting, similar to what you do on a Zoom, and my other screen typically runs the show. And that screen, I'm having to move around a little bit to try and get to see a bit more of my show notes. So if I do happen to pause a little bit in terms of covering some of these things, please forgive me. Just trying to make sure that I do the shows that we review justice as well. The DNA podcast can be found at www.dnapodcast.com. So, please do go check out Kira Dineen's podcast, and have a look at what they've produced for her overall show. Move around a couple of things again and see if I can't see the next show as well as I get ready to change screens here. So, all right. So the next show that's up, I think is extremely interesting, is BIOS. So Chaz Polito and Chris Gadban both host this show. And one of the things that I've noticed in their show format is that they bring in quite frequently other co-hosts as well. And so you'll see, Chaz oftentimes will introduce the initial sort of topic for the day, and then they will quickly switch over to, other potential hosts from the company that helps host this as well, which is Alix Ventures. So Alix Ventures, puts this on. They review a lot of these things from like the financing side or the VC side of things, which again makes it interesting for me. A lot of the companies that I work with are early stage companies, in addition to a few of the later stage companies that have been, funded for quite a while. And so, with that, it just provides a nice overall dichotomy of views in terms of life sciences. So let me just read the show summary that the team at Alix has for BIOS. So it brings together cutting edge insights from life science industries that lead the forefront of innovation. They also, primarily focus in on founders, VCs, professors, and pharma at the intersection of tech and bio. So, definitely in our space in life sciences. As I said, it's put on by Alix Ventures, supporting early stage life science startups, engineering biology to drive radical advances in human health. And so that's their summary. My summary essentially is that this podcast primarily focuses on entrepreneurs that support biotech companies. And guests are really, they could be leaders in biotech. They also could be the entrepreneurs that are inside of the different companies as well. And to be honest, I just love hearing the diversity and similarities and contrasting VCs to science. So oftentimes you're going to hear just a lot about what they're going through in terms of trying to fund the particular company that's being reviewed as well. And so to me, it makes it really interesting. Some of the recent episodes that they've had. So the future of genetic medicine with Scribe Therapeutics, with their founders, Ben Oakes and Dave Savage. They've also covered pharma and BD to tech bio VC with Becky Feinhardt and Andreessen Horowitz. So to me, again, it provides a little bit more of this dichotomy by having folks that help to drive funds. And then also Seth Liebich is the principal at 8VC Bio Team as well. And he was on that same episode. They covered cell-free systems with Michael Jewett, who's a professor at Northwestern. And so, that episode is a definite listen to as well, because they cover synthetic biology and cell-free systems in the same episode. There's a tech and bio era episode with Vivek Baha, and then and he's the managing director at Foresight Capital. There's a future of drug discovery with Samir Mitagori, who's a professor at Harvard Core Institute. So just a few of the folks that have been interviewed on the Bio Show, as well as the as well as the episode titles as well. Just some really interesting, again, topics in our space, and definitely one that folks should check out. The place to go for these, if you have a podcast app on your phone, I typically look things like this up, and so I've tried to provide you the show art as a part of this episode, so at least you can look at it and know that you're getting the right one. In addition to that, for BIOS, you would go to www.bios.community. So that's the place to find the BIOS episode as well. Skipped one there. Let me not skip this one, because I think this this host is actually on, potentially watching us as we're recording this. So Chris, if you're there, welcome, and hello. So Chris Connor hosts the Life Science Marketing Radio podcast. And again, I mean, from my perspective inside of life sciences, it's interesting to hear how people are going to plan in terms of, going to market, how they're going to work on, communicating different things that are going to happen inside of the marketplace overall for life sciences as well. And so, from my perspective, Chris does a fabulous show here, and just does a really good job in terms of pulling all sorts of variety of guests, in addition to a different perspective in terms of life sciences. So Chris's show is another one to check out, and his show can be found at lifesciencemarketingradio.com. So www.lifesciencemarketingradio, all one word, .com. And some of the episodes that he's had recently, let me just cover a couple of these as well. So essential communication skills in the world of biotech venture capital, which, I mean, I think for any company that's out there having to pitch or thinking about pitching, again, just a great episode to go through. Marketing a region, growing life science in South Carolina. I honestly, hadn't really considered this. I've interviewed people kind of in what they would call the flyover biotechnology area, where there just isn't, a lot of a strong core of biotechnology or life sciences in the area. And, to me, South Carolina just doesn't come to mind. Unlike, maybe Research Park in North Carolina, or, further, much further up the Northeast coast, to Boston, for sure comes to mind. And so, this just kind of opened my eyes at least a little bit more in terms of what's going on in South Carolina as well with life sciences. So, definitely a beneficial episode. 3D bioprinting. I think it'll be so cool whenever this, comes, into its final stages. And there's a lot of great discussion points in this episode that that both Chris as well as the guest, kind of bring up with regards to 3D bioprinting in that episode. And then getting around the data delusion, and then the magic school bus to head of strategy. It was also another great episode that was recent. So, just a lot of really good things that that this podcast highlights. And, I like the show format. The host is great, and so are the guests. And so definitely something to check out as well. And then last but not least on my list here, so Vital Science is a bit of a different podcast in my mind. So we've talked about the folks over at Alix Ventures hosting BIOS, but in this case, Charles River also has a podcast of their own. They put out an episode, I think it's like one every 3 weeks or so. It's hosted by Gina Mullaney and then Chris Garcia. So the way that they host these episodes, again, from listening or covering the podcast itself, the format reminds me a little bit of, if you've ever listened to the podcast Serial, it reminds me a little bit of that format. So there's it's Gina comes on and she introduces kind of the topic for the day. Chris then interviews the guest, and then in between, Gina will come in and sort of talk about and provide more details about a specific topic, which, congratulations to that team for, all of the great work that they're doing in terms of, pulling together that production. It's not something that, I'm a solo podcaster, and typically do a lot of the editing and things like that by myself. So, I could see all of the work that must go into this particular podcast, both in terms of coming up with the topics, but also, having that sort of supporting dialogue isn't an easy thing to pull off. So, I just wanted to quickly mention that's just kind of an interesting, way to host an overall podcast. I think they do a phenomenal job supporting each other, both Gina and Chris, in terms of, pulling this thing off, and it's just a great show. So let me talk a little bit about their episodes. Most recently they had one on open science. So more or less, it talks a little bit about the, sort of the level of patents that are going on in kind of our space, and then all of the, I guess you could say negative effects, but at the same time, it's just the constraints that happen against the science then by having tons of patents in the space. And so there's a discussion about open science, reprogramming stem cells for drug development. Are we one shot away? So having gene therapy treatment for the use in epilepsy. And as a matter of fact, I know somebody that has an epilepsy drug that they're working through the pipeline right now. And so, this one might actually be interesting, as well to some of the folks that at least I know that are leading early startup drug companies in that space. Can psychedelic drugs really boost brain health? And then lastly, from humble beginnings to potential treatment for ALS. And so, so in terms of my space, I mean, this one, as well, just provides an awful lot of great material in life sciences. And so that's one of the reasons why, at least for me, whenever they have new episodes that come out, I typically download and right away, trying to go through the episode, just enjoy the show format as well as the hosts. This one can be found, it's got a really long URL, so I'm not going to read this off, but essentially it's Charles Rivers' website, followed by Insights, then Vital-Science-Podcast. And so I will post all of this in the show notes for this particular episode, just so that folks can, kind of follow along. But I'm hoping that, this episode really, one helps to draw a little bit of attention to these different podcasts that I've mentioned. Each one of these podcasters put a lot of effort, I'm sure, into each and every episode, both chasing down guests as well as, just trying to work through the episode itself and just make sure that we're providing something of value to the folks in the field. And I definitely enjoy them. I, hope that, this will draw even more listenership to each of the podcasts that I've mentioned. And, yeah, I mean, that's what I had for this afternoon. For those of you who are on, I see that we've got, it looks like 3 people on, currently watching. Thanks a lot for coming and watching, but essentially, that's what I wanted to cover today. Thanks a lot. Have a great week. Take care.